get ready to fight from within. You're about to go behind enemy lines on WNJC.
Roger, 3-2. Goliath copies all. Go ahead. Target is surrounded by multiple firms entering what appears to be a residential area. Requesting permission to engage.
From the People's Republic of New York City, you're now going behind enemy lines with Gene Berardelli and Russ Gallo.
And you are now behind enemy lines. Hey there, how you doing, America? Gene Berardelli here with you on a beautiful New York evening. And joining me on the line on this New York primary night as we're taping it, two actual, goodness gracious, actual live New York Republicans on the line with us. Of course, our friends and show contributors, Amanda Kohut and Matt Fairley. Amanda, Matt, how are you?
Oh, what a night, Gene. What a beautiful election night.
I've got scotch. I'm good to go. Let's rock.
Oh, the scotch is flowing in the Fairley household. This is going to be a rip-roaring show, folks. I got to tell you, the one thing that we're going to be getting into, we're going to be getting into a lot of exit poll stuff. The winners and losers pretty much don't matter, in my opinion, and I'll tell you why about that as well. Let's get the obvious out of the way. I'm going to first start with, of course, ladies first, Matt Fairley. So Trump wins right at the 9 o'clock hour, trouncing his competition in his home state. And should we be surprised about this or no?
We're waiting for you, Fairley. Gene said ladies first.
He said ladies first.
Oh,
He did say
okay,
ladies
I see what he
first.
did there. So he went with the dead air just so he could spite me. All right, Fairley, I'm going to you
because
first.
that's the kind of guy I am today.
It's the kind of guy I am.
I'm not shocked that Trump won. There were so many variables going into today, but I mean, anyone who grew up in New York knows that Donald Trump has just been a presence in New York media, in New York tabloids, in New York, in the New York papers, in New York business, in New York real estate for decades. That the fact that he was able to just, waltz to what is looking like at this point is going to be a complete, maybe delegate sweep, is not that big a surprise. I saw a very interesting, and it shows in that I saw a very interesting stat point around of, the amount of money that was spent by each candidate in New York. Trump spent the least by far, $65,000 to like $500,000 and $500,000 for Cruz and Kasich.
Kohut, what's your take on the results that we all knew were coming?
Well, I say that this now gives credence to the polls that we had been seeing for quite some time, Gene. We knew it was going to be a Trump blowout, and from the counties that so far have reported results, Trump is only under the 50% margin in 2 counties, and not by much. It's less than 1% that's keeping him from that 50% threshold. So we're going to see what happens there throughout the night. I actually have some exit polling information that I thought was rather interesting, but we'll discuss that later on in the show. The only county where Trump is not currently winning is his home county of residence, New York County, Manhattan, where Kasich is leading.
And that really shouldn't be too surprising given the dearth of Republicans that are in the People's Republic of New York City. Before we get going into any analysis, and I know that we're going to have tons of it going forward here, because, like I said, we are all bona fide New York Republicans. We know what's going on in our own state. Let's get some of the rules out of the way, and Amanda's going to correct me if I'm wrong, but the way that the delegate split is done in New York is that there are some at-large delegates that you'll get And if you're over 50%, you get all of those. Then it goes by congressional district, where you have 27 congressional districts with 3 delegates apiece. If you get over 50% in a given congressional district, you get all 3. If you are under 50% and your second place opponent gets more than 20%, you split it 2-1. So just like living in New York, the rules are very confusing for voting for Republicans as well. Did I get it right, Amanda?
You got it right, Gene.
Oh my God!
Probably
Fairley,
one of the
you owe me
most
money. I am a lawyer. Okay, so Amanda, you said you had some exit polling. Go ahead, say that again, Fairley.
So I can't imagine I owe you much.
Yeah, not much at all. So now, Amanda, let's get into some of your exit polling. I have some data as well. See, at least 2 out of 3 people on the show do show prep. So what do you have for us? Tell me some numbers. Talk wonky to me.
Oh, talk wonky to you? Okay. Well, from the Fox News exit poll of Republican voters in New York, they asked what their top concern is in terms of issues. Number 1, obviously, the economy and jobs. Number 2, terrorism. Interestingly enough, immigration only made up 8% of top priorities for Republican voters. So less than 1 out of every 10 Republican claimed immigration as their top issue, which is really interesting when you consider the fact that Trump has really run on the immigration platform. You would think that the top concern would correlate to Trump's, real red meat platform issue, and that's not the case here. Another interesting tidbit from the Fox News exit polls is that Republican voters in New York are looking for change, which really seems to, to go against, the more even-keeled, moderate Republican voters. So it really seems like we're having all these bits of data that should lead to a different conclusion, but the answer we're getting is Trump.
I just want to point out for the viewers I want to point out for the listeners at home, while you're listening to all this exit poll data, you're listening to all this parsing, you should be aware of one thing, is that I was one of the people that they polled. So please take that into account and take all that with a grain of salt.
Okay, we need to know your exit poll experience. I need to know how they do these things. Go for it. I want to know everything.
There was a guy standing. I went and I voted, and on my way out, there was a guy out there who had a bunch of pads, and they were different colors for Democrats and for Republicans. And he asked, "Hello, would you like to take part in an exit poll?" And on top, it had all of the different news organizations that were sponsoring the poll, and it was basically all of them: AP, Fox News, CNN, ABC News. All of them. It was a group poll, and then it had a number of questions, some demographic questions. Age, race, income, that type of thing, and then who I voted for, and then a number of questions, the questions that Amanda was just talking about, and then other questions about how we felt about the other candidates, and I think that brings into a very interesting question going forward, because this is a night that really makes it look like Trump is going to be more and more likely to be our nominee. 40% of Republicans who voted in the primary are actively scared of a Trump presidency. And that is one of the questions that was on there, and that is how that turned out. And that's an interesting statistic to come out of tonight.
It's an interesting statistic, but the Fox News exit polling showed that of New York Republican voters, they asked them, if your candidate doesn't win, who will you never vote for? Or something like that. 25% said Donald Trump, that if he's the nominee, they're not going to vote for him. 29% said John Kasich, which is surprising considering he's now throwing around the electability card, given that, and Amanda Kohut will tell you this, how he's consistently beating Hillary Clinton in the polls head-to-head. And, of course, in New York, 40% say never cruise, and that all has to do with New York values. Right, Amanda?
Yes, it does, Gene. That was, I think, Ted Cruz's real killer. And I think he could have mitigated that problem if he had apologized for it. But Cruz seems to have a habitual problem of not owning up to his mistakes. He tends to double down on them. And I think that it kind of festered long enough that by the time he rolled around to New York, despite all the primary victories he's had in the states leading up to this, there was just no coming back from him.
Matt, did the New York values comment offend you?
It offended me. You know, I'm a New Yorker, you know, not from the city, but from out in Suffolk County. You know, I've been in the city now since 2002, so, you know, I've been a member of the New York, of different parts of New York for almost my entire life. I think the problem is that, you know, New York has never, ever counted in a primary before. I mean, I think, you know, the last time around it came in 2012, I showed up to vote, and my choice was Mitt Romney or Mitt Romney. You know, 4 years before that, it was John McCain or John McCain, because normally by now the nominee is set. So you didn't have to worry about offending New Yorkers if you're a Republican, because A, the primaries never mattered before, B, you're not going to win the general election. So I think Ted Cruz was sitting there saying, yeah, I can piss these people off because I don't need them. And yeah, it did offend me a little because, you know, I'm a New Yorker and I love this town, I love this state, and I know what these values are about. You know, so, but I also think, you know, it was a bit of political calculus on Ted Cruz's fault based on the fact that no one has ever had to care about New York Republican votes before until 2016.
And you know, I'm going to turn to you, Amanda Kohut, for this question. You just heard Matt Fairley say that New York mattered this time around in the presidential cycle because of the calculus and that nothing is set yet. But in the grand scheme of things, does New York really matter? It's not going to matter in the general. I'm going to give you my take and then you can disagree. It's not going to matter in the general. And you had a front runner running in his home state. How can New York really matter under those circumstances?
Well, I think that the X factor here is Trump. I think if Trump was removed from the equation, but you had all of the other scenarios that came from this election cycle with the crowded field, no matter what happened with the field that crowded, it would have taken a long time to whittle down to an eventual nominee. And I think that going in, seeing how large that field was, campaigns should have prepared for the long haul. They should never have assumed that it was going to follow the normal cycle where you would have the whole thing locked up by late March, early April, and they should have planned accordingly. So, yes, in terms of this particular election cycle, New York matters, and I think that it's something that could have been foreseeable. Okay,
now I'm going to throw this to Matt Fairley. I love playing ping pong with you guys, by the way. Hitting the ball across the net and hitting it back to me. Matt Fairley, you obviously agree with that New York matters. I'm going to play straw man just for a second. But now we're talking towards general election. Is New York going to be in play if we have a Trump nominee?
I doubt it. I really, really doubt it. I mean, this is a little, for our national listeners, this is a little inside baseball, but the New York Republican Party has been just abysmal for almost a decade now. You know, our last gubernatorial candidate, you know, barely broke 40%, and, you know, our last two Senate candidates, you know, Wendy Long, who we just re-nominated for Senate candidate, barely broke 30% statewide. So, you know, it's not a Republican state. You know, whoever the nominee is, whether it's Hillary Clinton, it's probably going to be Hillary Clinton, or Bernie Sanders, they could nominate Benito Mussolini and put him on the Democratic ticket, and he's probably going to win New York in the fall. You know, it's just not a good ground. You know, again, barring some kind of weird black swan political event where something happens that no one could have predicted, but, you know, it's just not fertile ground. So, yeah, maybe, you know, Hillary will have to spend some money here that she didn't think she'd have to, but she's still going to win New York in the fall, just like every presidential candidate has done since Ronald Reagan. You know, I think Reagan was the last one to take New York, and that's going on 30 years now.
Absolutely. We put the same question to our chat room at www.behindenemylinesradio.us as I hear that Matt Fairley needs to have his second drink from the ice clanking around in there. We had a chat room going on our Listen Live page. Click on the button, and you can hang out in the chat room with a bunch of people, including everybody on the show right now. And, Amanda, you got any more sexy exit poll data for us right now?
Not at the moment. I am still looking at live results coming in.
Well, then you know what? I have some sexy